In the Galactic University of Verith Prime, there were three unspoken rules: never challenge a Deathworlder, never underestimate a human, and never combine both. But Professor Tall ignored all three. He was an Athonian, a species known for elongated limbs, shimmering scales, and a cultural obsession with dominance in the academic hierarchy. He believed strength and intellect went hand in hand, and to prove superiority he often tested students physically. It was supposed to be harmless, a tradition, an arm wrestling challenge after a difficult lecture, but today his arrogance would teach him a lesson. He'd never forget, seated in the grand amphitheater of the Xenobiology Department, human student Alira Voss sat quietly at her desk, long brown hair tied lazily back in a cord. She wore the standard university robes, but somehow they seemed more casual on her, as if the heavy fabric didn't weigh her down like it did the others. Professor Tall had spent the past 40 minutes explaining the biological inferiority of mammalian musculature, particularly that of Deathworld species. His lecture was laced with smug smiles, condescension, and subtle insults. Alira had said nothing she rarely did. She was from Earth, a Class 5 Deathworld, a place the Galactic Council had once tried to quarantine after first contact, until they realized containing humans was like trying to cage fire. Now they tolerated humanity, but most still considered them primitive, violent, and unpredictable. Professor Tall finished his lecture with a flourish, his tail curling smugly behind him. Now, students, to conclude our lesson on comparative limb strength, I propose a demonstration. He scanned the room, his gaze settling on Alira Voss. Miss Voss, would you indulge us in a friendly challenge? Alira looked up from her notes, her eyes half lidded, her voice soft. Sure, Professor. She didn't even sound interested. Some of the other students shifted nervously in their seats. The amphitheater was silent. The last time someone challenged a human in direct physical competition was during the Tarvax Games 3 years ago. The Tarvax still limped when it rained, but Professor Tall thought himself clever. This was different. He told himself this wasn't combat, merely academic curiosity. They moved to the central demonstration table. Tall's long purple arm extended gracefully, his forefingers flexing his scales caught the light shimmering green and silver. Alira rolled up her sleeve, revealing pale freckled skin and a forearm lined with corded muscle, not bulky but dense the way earthborn physiology often was, designed by evolution to survive predators' gravity. And worse, they locked hands. Tall's talons rested lightly against Alira's knuckles. Ready, Miss Voss? Alira shrugged. Whenever you like. Professor Tall applied pressure first, just enough to test her grip. She didn't react. He increased the force, his own tendons flexing beneath the scales. Still no movement. Her expression didn't change. He pushed harder, his claws digging slightly into her skin, but Alira only blinked lazily, as if mildly bored. Professor Tall's frill flared slightly, a sign of irritation. He leaned and applying full calculated strength to his limb. After all, he was twice her size. His species was engineered by nature for climbing, lifting, dominating. Surely this human girl would yield. But Alira didn't yield. In fact, she hadn't even tightened her grip. She was just sitting there, her elbow planted on the table, her eyes distant, like she was thinking about lunch. Then, without warning, her fingers shifted by 1 millimeter. There was a sound like wet twigs snapping. Tall screamed. The sound echoed to the amphitheater. His arm convulsed, spasming, as his radius and ulna shattered beneath Alira's grip. She hadn't even stood up. She'd barely moved. The alien professor collapsed backward, clutching his ruined limb, scales paling from violet to gray in shock. Alira released his hand, calmly wiping her fingers on a napkin she had taken from her pocket. Her voice was still soft, almost gentle. Oh, sorry, Professor. I thought we were starting. The students sat frozen. Nobody breathed. Some of the alien students looked physically ill. Others whispered frantically in their own languages. Recording devices captured the moment, streaming it to various networks across the galaxy. Within minutes, it would be viral. But Alira just sat back down in her seat, opening her datapad and resuming her notes. Professor Tall was quickly attended to by medical drones. His arm swaddled in regenerative mesh, his eyes wide, his frill pressed tight against his neck. He wouldn't forget this day, nor would any professor who would watch the footage later. That evening, Alira sat alone in the human dormitory, sipping tea. Her roommate, Juno, another Earthborn, leaned against the doorframe, watching the playback on her tablet. You broke his arm, Juno said, eyes wide. Alira replied, casually, didn't mean to. You didn't even lean forward. Nope. Juno laughed nervously. You're going to get A. Reputation. Alira's lips twitched in a hint of a smile. I already had one Deathworld. Humans always did. The galaxy knew Earthlings were dangerous, but they kept forgetting exactly how dangerous. The problem wasn't just strength. It was control. Earth trained its children from birth to survive falls, animal attacks, environmental disasters. Humans evolved in a place where failure meant death, not inconvenience. So while Tall flexed muscles, he didn't know how to break bones without trying. That was a human. Advantage Juno sat down beside her. What's going to happen now? Alira shrugged. Probably nothing. Council protocols can't punish me for a challenge. He initiated anyway. He'll heal the mesh tech. Is good for bones. Maybe he'll think twice next time. Juno laughed. Yeah, maybe. Or maybe he'll call for sanctions. Alira took another sip of tea, letting the warmth settle in her stomach. Doesn't matter. Humans don't really care about sanctions. Juno knew she was right. Humans didn't fit into the galactic mold. They weren't interested in academic dominance or status displays. They liked learning, but not showing off. They liked peace, but only if you didn't poke them too hard. And when you did, well, moments like today happened across the galaxy. On various news streams of footage looped again and again. The small human girl, seated calmly, her hand barely moving, the snap, the scream, the stillness. Afterward, experts debated on panels, some calling it a tragic misunderstanding, others warning it was proof of human savagery. Military analysts privately took notes, revising their estimates of human combat potential. Deathworlders were always considered threats, but humans were a special category, adaptable, social, and worst of all, casual about violence. Professor Tall recovered physically, but he never returned to dominance displays. His lectures became more cautious, his tale more still. When humans were in a room, Alira Voss continued her studies, graduating with honors in xenobiology and tactical sociology. Some whispered that she received offers from military think tanks. Others believed she quietly returned to Earth. Either way, her legend remained. Deathworld girl casually breaks alien professor's arm without standing up. It was a headline, a warning, a story whispered in classrooms and military academies across the stars. A reminder, 3 unspoken rules: never challenge a Deathworlder, never underestimate a human, and never combine both.